Good morning and welcome to the People Overdue Committee. Before I start, I need to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Item 1, apologies for absence. It's Councillor Don Morris, who substituted my Councillor Joyce Barrow, and Sean Lyons from the Diocesan Board. Any more? I think Councillor Hilary Love.
We've had no apologies from her. Yes, she's not.
Yeah. Disposable pecuniary interest, anybody?
Chair, I'm a trustee of Bethlehem, a care provider for adults with learning disabilities. It's a voluntary position that I hold with them.
Minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of March and the 11th of May. Would somebody like to?
I'll move.
Claire? In favour?
Abstention, Chair.
Yeah.
Public question time, we have none. Member question time, we have none. So over to Laura Tyler, who's going to give you a presentation on market management.
Morning all. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Laura Tyler, Assistant Director for Joint Commissioning. So I try to keep slides less there, just so I know you're deaf by PowerPoint. But what I've done is I've tried to give you a bit of a flavour and an overview as part of the briefing report that you would have seen in advance. But this is a bit more detail around some of the work that we're trying to do around managing the market. So just to take you through then. So just in terms of managing the care market in our current position, so we currently support in a region of about 3,500 people in long-term care. We've got a really good track record of keeping people out of long-term care homes, as you'll be aware, and a really good track record across Shropshire at supporting people in the community. So you can see there by the lines, the blue one is around the support that we provide, and see the lines are increasing, and then the yellow lines are the nursing and care home provision, so that is decreasing and that continues to do so. So we're quite proud of that position. Moving on. So just lifted this from our self-evaluation. So as part of the CQC readiness, preparing that Shropshire are doing, CQ is around the care provision. So we've done some work around what do we know, how do we know it, and what we're doing to improve, and some of the impact and outcomes around that. So that's a really key area for us, part of our improvement in our development plans that we're progressing at pace, preparing ourselves ready for future CQC assurance visits. One of the things that we do know is that we need to do some work around our prevention and our what we describe as our front door model, and being really clear about what that looks like. So that we'll talk about that later on. So we know some of the current challenges, and you'll be aware of those. We've got increasing costs across the market, which I'll talk about a bit later. We've got an ageing and obviously the rural nature of Shropshire. We've got workforce and retention challenges, although we have seen improvement very recently on those. They are still there. We're aware of the demand from the hospital. We're seeing increased complexity of clients, especially those coming from the hospitals, acute and the community hospitals. We are seeing an increasing number of contacts, which we've seen in the report to social care, and we are seeing an increasing need for mental health support across as well. And they're just some of the main ones that we've got currently. You may have seen this before, but it is quite telling, I think, in terms of our population. So that is our ageing population, in particular those aged 85 plus that we are going to see up until 2028. You can see there in terms of the south of the county, where we've got quite an ageing cohort of those over the age of 85. And we'll describe how that's causing, and has been continuing to cause some issues, particularly around domiciliary care capacity within that area. And that is a really key area and focus for us as part of the redesign work that we're doing with the Care at Home project. So we've recently done some work with, we put a survey out to our care providers. We had to do it as part of a national return. I picked up just some of the points there. We've got a bit more detail, and we'll do a comparison again the same time next year. But we are still seeing, 66% of the respondents continue to find recruitment and retention difficult, either difficult or very difficult. We know nationally, so this is, I believe, the skills for care data, which again will be updated later on in the year in November. Nationally, we've got 11.5% of vacant direct care roles, with a turnover of 31.8% annually. Vacancies across West Midlands are obviously lower and with a lower turnover rate. So Shropshire also has a higher vacancy and turnover rate in comparison. So vacancies are highest in domiciliary care, which we probably were aware of, and obviously doing some work around that. And we know we put an increase on the fees this year to try and do something about that. But we are seeing quite high turnovers in the care homes, particularly with nursing. So that again is something that we're looking at as part of our quality and our assurance monitoring. So that's just a bit of a flavour in terms of some of the workforce pressures that we've got. Obviously, children's placements, I won't go through all the detail there, but we know generally we keep a really close eye on the performance and the quality of the services that we use there. We are looking to align some of the quality assurance work. We've just set up a new one for the care homes and pulling together on a risk matrix basis, a BI dashboard, which is really great. So we're developing and building on that. And that's what we want to do is focus on the children's element next, and then work on the domiciliary care. So we're going to cascade that across. So we've got really comprehensive risk assessment dashboards. So you'll see there, learning disabilities and autism. We know the Disabled Children's team have seen increases in the allocation of numbers coming through there. You might not be able to see that chart so closely, but generally when they move into adults, we've got high numbers that are supported at home, and with all live by themselves or with family. So we've got high numbers there. Again, something which I need to be proud of. I need to open mine in so I can see it. We've got, thank you, Sophie. So Shropshire has currently got about 3,500 people, adults and children, recorded on as being on the autistic spectrum as well. That's another area of focus for us, and we need to do a lot more work around ensuring we've got services that support individuals, and particularly those with more complex behaviours. And then you'll see there that for those people aged 55 to 64, Shropshire is predicted to rise by 3.1% in 2030 compared to England. So we are preparing and we are aware of some of these increases, but I think what we're trying to do with the market, and I do talk about it a bit later on, is really trying to work with the market to be more inclusive rather than have bespoke services. It's around if you're attending or trying to access any services, how can the market and services support anybody who wants to access it? And it's all about inclusivity rather than the kind of siloed working that's probably historically has been done.
Can I ask the question now, or do you want them at the end? Or
Do you want them at the end in case I pick up on it as I go through?
it's just a question on that slide. So
yeah, I'm happy to.
It's just the figure. The sentence that surprises me is the sentence in the penultimate paragraph where it says the percentage of adults with autism spectrum disorder in Shropshire will fall by 2%, while the England figure is predicted to rise by about 4%. So that's a bit odd. I hadn't expected to see that. So
yeah,
what's happening?
And it's interesting because whilst this is like puppy data, which is national data, I think actually what you'd be, from what people are telling us, they'd say that trend is not quite accurate, and we're seeing increasing operations saying that they're seeing a lot more people come through on the autistic spectrum. I think, and also it will be those probably who have been diagnosed. And I think that's probably where we're seeing a bit of a disconnect, because we know historically that we've got, and currently we've got issues around waiting lists and people getting diagnosis. So,
So who's when's that figure coming from?
It's-
Have we challenged it?
It's national puppy data, yeah, and I've asked for the updated puppy data based upon the new census information. So I don't ask for what it stands for, but it's quite something to do with population. But it's a national one, so they break it down for local areas based upon your demographics, population, what you've seen. What I do know is that is based on, I'm pretty sure it's 2011 census data. So we probably, I've asked for just some updates on that, which when we feed that into, hopefully it will be done in time to feed into our market position statement. So yeah, but it's a good point to raise, because I think and that's where we need to be really careful with data and what we know people are telling us. Yeah. So it's making sure that we've got a mix. So yeah, it's absolutely a good point to raise.
Sorry, Joe, just to follow on from that, would you even attempt to put a crashing green lights? Do you have any idea of the hidden, likely hidden need here?
It's really difficult, to be honest, Councillor, to know what hidden needs is. It's probably far greater than we know, hence why the model and the approach is around these services being really inclusive and making sure that people can access them in safely, and that's why that has to be the focus, rather than yes, we do need specialist services, absolutely, but people access shops, the quiet times supermarkets, that people, the theatres that adapt for dementia friendly, adapt for people with autism. These are the things that we need to be doing more of, and that's what we're trying to do. And the message to, it's very, we work very much on strength-based practice, don't we? Operations, very much strength-based practice. What can we do? What can you do for yourselves? And, it's not about we're going to label you as this. We want the market to work the same, basically. If they can meet needs, they can meet needs. Shouldn't be about you can meet needs of somebody with a learning disability, and I only support people with learning disabilities. It should be, if they, whatever their eligible need is, you need to be able to meet that. So it's trying to work with them in a very different way. And they're very, to be fair, the market are very receptive and supportive and are changing and adapting.
Can I just ask a question on that slide? If you just go back to it again.
Yeah.
What are the actual percentages? Because you say they've come down. Because I can't see on there. Are they on the graph? Are they? Or...
Oh, on the graph. Oh, okay.
So what percentage are they actually? Because it doesn't mean anything if they've come down by 3% if you don't know what percentage is.
I've got. I'm not to hand, I don't think, but I've got and the actual numbers of long-term care numbers that have come down, and it's. I think the long-term numbers over the last 4 years have come down. I think it's about, I'm not sure it's about 20% over the last 4 or 5 years, but I will check for you. But it's over 100, which is, considering our aging demographics, it's a really good thing. We are, as I said, one of the top. I can't remember.
But what's the actual percentage? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's all meaningless without knowing what percentage is.
Yeah, no, it's difficult to see. So on there, you've got. I think it picks up at about 80 and then comes down to just about 70, it's up about 78, 77%, but I can find for definite which one it is. Because percentages are meaningless, I think, actually it's numbers, so I'll get the numbers for you.
Yeah. Okay, it's just that I think they should probably be in the sentence.
Yeah, no, yeah.
For all of us. Poppy.
And you actually.
It stood for school day every day. We need to all Google what we stand for. Someone going to Google it. Come on, Duncan.
So these are some of the things that we look at in terms of the national data to try and inform where our trends and our data sets are, and sense check it against what we're seeing locally. So again, you'll see in 2040 it's the lighter colour, so that top line. And you can see the total predicted with learning disabilities does increase, not by huge amounts, but they're pretty much in line of each other. And you'll see the autistic spectrum bit slightly increases as well. But it's something we do need to keep an eye on to ensure that we are meeting needs of those coming through.
Projecting older people population information.
Thank you very much. I've asked again, just just in terms of caveat that data, it is that is based on census data 2011. So what they are working through that. So I'm hoping it's going to get some updated stuff for the, as I said, for the market position statement. So just in terms of the dom care current position, because I think that has been one of our biggest challenges across the market, as many of you will be aware, and some of the previous scrutiny discussions that we've had. Since March, and probably since certainly the end of February and definitely into March, we have seen a notable increase in market performance, as you can see. We are currently sourcing approximately 90% of all required packages compared to our average of 62% last year. From about mid 2021, it really dived in terms of our performance around allocating care packages, and it really stayed very low all last year. It was a really challenging year last year. But we have absolutely seen a direct correlation between giving a 12% increase in the pickup of the market this year. So and we're seeing huge, much higher numbers in terms of what we describe as pathway ones coming out of hospital, being able to go home, which is exactly what we wanted to see. So obviously Cabinet supported that decision when we went at risk. We didn't know if it would work, and it has. And continues to be quite, it is sustaining good performance as we speak. So, hopefully that will continue. Sorry, so can you just go back a second? Sorry. And I think it is important just to point out, though, we still are struggling southwest of the county. So that is something that we need to focus on, and as part of the wider scope around what we're going to do around a domiciliary care market, we may have to think very differently about how we commission in the south of the county because of the rurality and the levels and the numbers coming through. Okay. You can have these slides after, so you can, by all means, and if you want to send any questions after, I'm absolutely happy to do so. For care homes, for those over 65, as we move away from the pandemic, we've still got challenges within the market, particularly around cost and workforce pressure. Market capacity is generally better than it has been, and particularly with fewer homes that have been closing and obviously fewer under restrictions. Quality remains relatively stable. However, we are doing some further work on this, and I'll talk about quality in a bit. The focus is looking at making sure we've got the right capacity in the right place. So I'll talk a bit in a minute about what we're doing around some modelling work, which as a commissioner I get very excited about. So I'm hoping you'll be equally as excited. But it's really important to make sure that we have got the right capacity in the right place across the county.
Can I just ask if we got any care homes now ourselves?
Yes, one.
That one in the south.
Yeah. One in the south, yes.
Not the name of it. I went
there.
That's it. I went down to it. Very nice place.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about long-term number placements are low. However, we do have short-term placements, so essentially people who are needing a placement, particularly coming back out of hospital and actually from the community, will go into what we describe as a short-term placement. So up to 6 weeks, whilst they then have another assessment, because some will improve, and many will, and many may need be assessed as needing a longer-term placement. Despite increasing costs, we've got many care homes who are still citing sustainability issues. That's certainly coming through the Care Association very clearly. As stated within the Shropshire Plan, though, our aim is first and foremost to support people where we can at home. So that is what we're doing with the market and the main point of what we're doing with the market position statement. So it's very slow, but sorry, it's really small writing. I do apologise, but I think it's really important to understand the context of some of the benchmarking that we do as well. Shropshire is now paying the highest rate for domiciliary care across the West Midlands. Now, actually, I think that's something to be proud of, because we've talked about, making sure that our carers are paid well and that we are supporting our market. I think it does come down to the fact that we are a very rural county as well. The second, one of the second highest is, as you can imagine, is also a rural county. So, you know, we're not alone in terms of some of the challenges there. We have, Shropshire is also the second highest on our current nursing costs for those over 65. I think we need to do a bit more work around and try and understand some of that. So we're doing some work around, you know, why is that? Is it related to the workforce? Is it because we've got maybe homes that are smaller? So, you know, what we will see homes of 20 to 40, and sometimes obviously the base rate costs may be higher as associated with that. Or is it, you know, it could be multiple different things being added, but it is something that we need to have a look at. The other area of cost in terms of where we know Shropshire spend highly are on our 18 to 65 individuals. So the LGA recently did a report and they highlighted, I've put it in there, so our total spend for adult social care, 18 plus was relatively very high, placing us 17 nationally out of the 151 local authorities. And within this, the 14th highest spend of younger adults. So that's something that we're looking at. So part of the work that we're doing around supported living is looking at remodelling on what we're doing around that. So it is an area that we are working very closely with operations to make sure we're not over-prescribing. And then it leads us into that kind of technology discussion on what else could we do, shared hours. One of the other things that we do know is historically Shropshire has had single units of care. So is there something about making sure that future developments that we've got, you know, larger number of units collectively that we can do that shared kind of the shared support from providers. So we do know we need to do a bit more work on that, because obviously it is putting pressure on our budget. And I've just put in there because it's interesting that is a different position to children's and young people, which as you can see there, benchmark per spend per head much lower than the other local authorities, the similar local authorities. So but I would say and make sure that I wouldn't want to lose the fact that the children's providers services are also seeing the same workforce pressures and the challenges that for adult services are also seeing. Okay. So just in terms of doing some benchmarking, so we talked about a really important part of what we do around market management is quality as part of the Care Act, and you'll see that within the briefing report. It is really important that we are managing our market and we are seeing good quality services, not only and for individuals in terms of ensuring we've got really good services that provide dignity, care and respect, and, you know, and really person-centred care. But also it's one of the first things that, you know, when we are inspected in the future, the CQC will be looking out for. What does your market look like? How are you supporting them? So we know we have got more work to do around that. And as I described, we're working through some of those dashboards. But generally, we do bench quite highly across West Midlands region in terms of our quality of care. Particularly domiciliary care. I don't think we have any that are inadequate within domiciliary care, which is good. But as I said, we do need further work to look at this, and that will change as we work with services. So we know there are some services that are inadequate that we actually have stopped commissioning with, and many of you will be aware of that. But ultimately, as long as they're CQC registered, they will still be counted on that. So that's what's really important, to work closely with CQC as well.
Sorry, could I just ask how you actually monitor that? Is it by physical inspection or
yeah,
or paperwork?
It's a bit of both, councillor. So we've got multiple different elements. We talked about the dashboard where we've got risk matrix coming in. So we'll look at how many beds they've got. You know, that they may have, like, you know, if they've got too many beds not being used, we'll be, okay, what's that about? Is it a sustainability issue? Some will talk to us about issues. There is like what we described as just care homes now. There's a care home and actually domiciliary care, but there's a tracker, a national tracker that they are expected as part of their regs to fill out, which will look at number of agency staff. If we see high agency staff, it makes us, you know, again, we'll weight that risk. and there will be safeguarding numbers. And in fact, if there are no safeguardings coming through, that will raise concerns to us. Well, why is there no safeguardings? You know, things will happen, and they should be reporting that through to us on the CQC. So there will be multiple things that are fed in. If there are serious concerns, and we are working with, particularly with providers that are inadequate or requires improvement, we will go on do site visits. There is a resource issue with local, you know, with our teams, and that's something we're looking at and working with. But ultimately, it's the intelligence coming in, and then if they will go on site. My view is there is nothing. Eyes and ears on site is really important, and you could see that during COVID. It was really important to go on site and see and witness and see it yourself. Yes, Quentin.
Oh, it's me, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Can you just go back a slide, because there's just a bit about consistency, because you've got a different group of local authorities there compared children's services with. So I just think comparisons are difficult enough as it is about changing the comparators. So I don't know which is the best comparisons to use, but I prefer it to be consistent across. And can we have the equivalent spend per head for those councils on adults? So, because you're giving it for children's, and it shows very clearly the difference, but on adults, I don't know what the difference is. Stark, massive, small, you know. So a similar graph to that for adults would be very useful when you send it out.
Okay.
And can you just in future think about consistency, because it's very hard if you change the comparators, because we don't really know where we are.
No, thanks. It's a really good challenge, and I think that's one area of work that we need to do a bit more with. So for adult social care particularly, we're very well supported across the region within West Midlands through our ADAS. So we do a lot of comparative work there. I think one of the things that we do need to do is comparative work against our most similar statistic group, because it is important that we understand, you know, West Midlands local authorities we know are very different to Shropshire. Yeah,
I would have thought that, but I'm happy for you to tell me no, that's the best people to compare it with. I'm not, you know, trying to be dogmatic about it, but I just think you need to be consistent.
Yeah.
Having chosen that.
Yeah.
That then we can go and speak to them, and we can understand, benchmark, and improve. But if we keep changing the comparators, we're never going to know where we are, will we?
No, it's a good challenge, and I think, you know, it's one of the actions as well that I want to do as commissioner is to make some more links with more rural counties to try and understand what is it that they're doing and developing. So
to push it, I'd like to see that data against the same comparators. If the view is we're best compared with similar councils to ourselves, well, how do we compare on quality with the similar councils to ourselves rather than the West Midlands councils? Just consistency, and then we can learn a bit more. Sorry, that's a challenge.
It's a fair point.
Thank you. Just on the quality, and we've had some email conversations around this, but how do you, or can you, or do you have any levers with CQC to speed up the improvement required in inadequate care homes? And I'm particularly concerned where they continue to operate without Shropshire or other local authority funded contracts, but can still attract self-funded.
And we've had email exchanges on this, haven't we, Councillor? It's really difficult, and I think, you know, we've thrown sounds quite aggressive. We have sent some challenging, you know, emails around, you know, the length of time it's taken. Their processes are so long and constrained, and they've got departments that deal with different things, and so it has been and continues to be quite difficult working with CQC. But I think that's why it's so important for us, I think, as a local authority to ensure that we are really robust around our quality assurance. It's really difficult, and we can't wait for CQC, but I take your point on the self-funders. That's why, you know, when we do go in and say, actually, you know, we've got serious concerns, we will have that conversation with everybody, you know, within that home or within that organisation. So, and I would hope that we could then, you know, support them to change and make their decision. But
because being inadequate doesn't stop them still advertising for customers, does it?
No.
And that's really concerning.
No.
With self-funders who may not understand the sort of, without experience, you don't know what's good, do you?
It's just. Hey, I'll speak loudly. Just to add to that, when the local authority is that concerned about a care home, we will put a suspension on referral, so it means that as a local authority, we won't refer people into that care home. As Laura said, we will actively communicate that message out to the residents in the care home. But also I think there's something around how we can inform self-funders who might be thinking about placing their loved one in that care home, and I think that's something that we need to work on. Because we've been as concerned as you have just recently on that one said care home. And we have regular communications with CQC, regular touch points with CQC and safeguarding. And I know it's one of Laura's kind of main priorities about how we can improve those relationships to ensure that decisions are made quicker.
If I may, Chair, I'm also concerned about how inadequate providers can reinvent themselves with another company and continue. And so, you know, locally it's come to light because staff weren't being paid, but you know, the system, the national system, the regulatory system doesn't seem adequate when homes are poorly performing. And I know it's a question. At the end of the day, they're still vulnerable people who I assume we have responsibility for as self-funders too.
Yeah, and that is challenging, isn't it? Because you're absolutely right. We have got responsibility across the whole market, which will include self-funders. So when we've got failing providers, the local authority will, the hosting local authority will go in and do that support. And it is exceptionally challenging, to be quite honest, because of exactly what you're describing, where you've got and providers will change themselves. They will develop into something very different and register as something different. And I think that's why that intelligence is really, really important, and our contracting is robust, and we're feeding that intelligence into CQC because we're the ones actually we've probably got more information locally than CQC will have. CQC are doing less on the directly going into homes inspections, so we are aware of that. So they will do very much more kind of I describe them as kind of desktop kind of review assessments. And so I think that's why it's really important. The quality side of it for us is really going to be fundamental, because it will be up to us as a local authority and working with health colleagues too around how we manage that market and support them, because I want to say the first and foremost bit is around support for our providers. It's a challenging area to work within. So, I do take the stand that we will go in and we will support and support, but until there's no improvement, then I will take I think we take a very different challenge and stance on that, because it's about safeguarding our most vulnerable, and that is really vitally important to us. Some lovely graphs there. So just in terms of ongoing pressure, so this is what we describe as individual service funds. So I haven't put that acronym on there. You'll be clear. Usually we call them our ISFs. But the individual service funds are essentially domiciliary care. So what you're seeing there in the black line was what the previous year looked like. So you can see the red line is where we budgeted for, and it took a massive dive down compared to where we thought we were going to be. That is purely because of people not being able to source domiciliary care, we believe, and particularly coming from the hospital. Because I'll show you in a minute a graph where it kind of correlates the opposite way, and it mirrors that exactly. So what we're seeing now is you can see that the yellow line, that's not the dotted line, the actual yellow line from April this year has absolutely gone right up, way up to where we expected the budget to be, and that is primarily due to a really increase and improvement in the domiciliary care market. We believe it will kind of peter down and will sustain, but it's that initial surge coming through from 1st of April this year. So where we've got, so the short-term residential, again, you'll see that black line from when we did the budget setting, which is around about August time last year, July, August time. From that point onwards, we saw a massive increase in need for short-term residential care. Two reasons. Biggest reason is up the domiciliary care market, which we're describing. We're really struggling at the time. And the other reason is we saw huge hospital pressures. Many of you will be aware that the hospital went into critical incident many times last year. And, you know, we, in terms of supporting, I think we were even in the summer period last year, we were seeing critical incident, which is quite, you know, unusual, but real pressure last year. I think, to be honest, I think last year was one of the most challenging and difficult years I think I've ever seen, ever, you know, across the market, across, you know, internally.
Can I just stop you there? So,
Yeah.
Obviously there's a critical incident at the hospital. So you know, we go up and try and assist. So does it result in some people who perhaps ordinarily would have stayed in hospital actually being transferred into care where their needs are quite high?
They've got to be medically fit to leave. I think that's the first thing. So they have to be medically fit to be able to leave the hospital. I think what we were seeing, in all honesty, Claire, is that a lot of people were poorly for a lot longer.
Yeah.
So whilst they were medically fit and didn't need to be in any acute setting as such, they were poorly for a lot longer, and particularly those who had got COVID, you know, and we know ourselves, if we've had it, how long it's taken to recover. You know, a lot of obviously chest infections, etc. You know, and people generally, probably because immunity may have been low because we've not been together for the last couple of years. I don't know. You know, we're seeing a lot of that. But no, it's pure. It's generally, you know, they have to be medically fit to be able to be discharged into that home. But we continue to see that all the way through. I think from that period onwards, up until probably March this year, when it did start to calm down. I mean, a very, very pressured winter, if I'm honest. Okay, next slide.
I ask a question, Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
On your short-term placements,
Yeah.
do you monitor how many turn into long-term placements? I'm assuming you want a low figure.
We're just literally going through that now to get an understanding of what happened. What we do know is that not a high proportion of them have done, because our long-term figures are still relatively low and stable. So we're working through and, you know, using START, which is our in-house provision service, to get people home as quickly as possible. So we're doing that piece of analysis because it's really, you're right, Councillor, it's really important for us to understand what happened to those individuals, you know, and what was the best outcome, because, you know, we've got to look at the length of stay and all that kind of scenario with that.
Our outturn position on performance of people in long-term care was lower than it was the previous year. So we know that's a good message, because it means that we are supporting people to live independently at home. But we do know between January and March, we had around 300 people in short-term spot beds. We had an update a couple of weeks ago, didn't we, Laura? And from that cohort of 300, it was down to 57 in short-term beds. What we're now working through, what is the outcome from all of those individuals? So we're assured that from that kind of, glut's the wrong word, of that cohort of 300, that the right outcomes for those individuals, because we know we had many poorly people that needed to go into short-term beds. On top of that, as Laura said in the previous slide, because of our domiciliary capacity wasn't where we wanted it to be, people needed to go into short-term beds because we didn't have the domiciliary support to support them at home. But that position has since changed from the last quarter.
And you can see there as well from the lines, you know, they've continued to fall since the 1st of April in terms of short-term residential beds, and coming way back down to where we'd expect them to be this year. So again, you know, that is positive, and we're, you know, the teams are working really hard to do that and to make sure that people are where they want to be, and that's the main thing. This is about people's choice and, you know, better improving outcomes for them. And then you can see short-term nursing again follows a very similar trajectory. The black line is last year, spiked hugely, and then you can see again the yellow line coming from beginning over here. I think it's got some red in it. I'm not sure why it's got some red in it. But again, those numbers are also coming down as well. It's kind of
You've obviously put a 12% increase onto domiciliary care to attract the workforce, which is positive. But have health increased their nursing contribution as well?
Yeah.
By a similar percentage?
I what they did for FNC, so which is their funding nursing care element. It did jump quite a bit this year because that's a nationally mandated increase, the FNC element. It's not up to the local health services. That is nationally mandated. It definitely did increase, councillor. We're also looking at our rates as well, because what we describe as our usual rates, which we've had historically, they are below. So we are looking at what it should look like realistically, and how that links into some of the work we've done around the fair cost of care work that across the market. So that's something that we are doing as we speak as well. Thank you. Now, you can't see, that's quite blurry. I do apologise because they're actual screenshots, but I am very excited about this stuff. One of the challenges that we've always had is there aren't enough beds. There aren't enough beds here. There aren't enough beds there. And I wanted to sense check that. So our fantastic data and intelligence team have taken the challenge, and also actually from Scrutiny and from a previous discussion we had around markets position statements around trying to divide it by north, central and south, because it's all very well county, but we're a big county, aren't we? So I won't take you through that, and I don't expect you to have a look at it, but it just shows some of the complexity around some of the inputs in the information there. But the question is, will Shropshire have sufficient care beds over the next 10 years? And if not, at what point will it have a bed deficit? So I challenge them to say, well, what does that look like in terms of residential and nursing? Because I don't want it together. It needs to be split because they're very different. What does that look like across north, central and south? And the input is, on the current numbers that we are placing, what are health placing, what does our self-funders numbers look like against our ageing demographics? And I can't remember what other levers are in, but it's essentially those elements. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you two questions. So driving around, I've noticed quite a few new homes open. So the one by Aldi, the Morris one, that's open. Well, there's one either side actually. There's a Morris one and another one. And just taking you back to your report, you say in your report that beds occupied by residents from outside of Shropshire Council put a huge strain on the staffing crisis. So because although they're privately funded in these care homes, if people are coming from away, it just adds to the staffing crisis. I just wondered if you wanted to expand on that.
I think when we go through it, I'll show you what we're trying to do. I think it's a really good question, Claire, because what we need to understand is, are we importing from other local authorities? And that is data that we do not really know and understand yet. So I can get the health data, I can get ours. We've got a sense of what our own self-funders look like. But from another local authority perspective, it has to be having an impact, because when we work through the models, which I'll show you, and then we've got care homes telling us actually they're at capacity, or they've only got one or a couple of beds. There's something not quite fitting somewhere. So it's trying to understand that, or it could be because that they've only got the workforce numbers for a number of beds within that home at that time. So essentially they're full, if that makes sense, even though they may have capacity there. They're full. So there is a bit of unpicking to do. So whilst this model, and whilst I am very excited about this model, it will only tell me part of that story. Yeah. But what it will do, it from the intelligence coming back through, from what we know, and from the numbers that we know, is going to start informing those those thoughts from a commission perspective to ask and to drill down and understand some of that. Councillor.
If I may, Chair, does that also apply to adults with learning disabilities? Because certainly in the past there have been families moving in because of second day of school, for example, who then remain as adults. And I just wonder if that's still a trend that's happening, or has that plateaued out a bit?
It's a good question, because
It is a good question. I think what we'd say, Ruth, is that we continue to see high numbers of children with disabilities coming through. I think we said, didn't we, last week? I think Sonia, the AD, said there's been a 300% increase in referrals into the disabled children's team over the last 12 months. And there could be many reasons for that. One of them could be that we still see long wait lists within our health provision within Shropshire, which I know this committee has been very interested in previously, but also that we have one of the largest special schools in Shropshire that historically could be seen as an attracting place to come as a family for that kind of support. But I think it's one that we would need to work through to understand in terms of the kind of the impacts from childhood into adulthood too.
Chair, thank you. Going back to your point about the fact you're unpicking what the this data between residential and care and the impact of incomers. This, I think, is going to be extremely important for planning.
yes,
Because we've had the debacle over Hencut, where it was not, although the inspector took the side of the appellant in thinking that this was generally a good thing, it wasn't necessarily unpicked properly as to whether this proposal was actually going to increase pressure on staffing and upon general services, and this never properly came out in that application and appeal. And well, we are where we are with it now, unfortunately. But if what you're doing can also be fed through to planning as a matter of urgency, because this is has real pressure upon the planning system.
just to give you the reassurance, Councillor, I'm working really closely with planning and colleagues on this, really closely. So we're working together on a policy. So I'm sharing this information to them. We're sharing, inputting onto their policies. So we are working really closely with other directorates on this. We've also got another meeting scheduled as well to look at not just the care home sector, but also what provision do we need now in the longer term in terms of the pressures that we've got, whether it's mental health, learning disabilities, because we've got to look at what is our model in terms of accommodation support for across the market. So yeah, I will absolutely give the assurance that we are working really closely with them on that, but absolutely right, it's so important. I get on, oh, it's awful, isn't it? So I do apologise, it's come out like that. But what it's doing is showing Shropshire has obviously an increased number of population, so we're making sure that we've got adequate beds. This is based on recent census data, as you can see there, and then it's split by north, south, and central. So it's a population of age 65 projected in those areas. Use the next slide. So that's what the model looks like. So you can increase, so you can do it by area, north, central, south, as I said, whether it's residential or nursing, and then you can change the admission per 100,000 population, which is how we record it as part of the data and performance information. We can do the same for it's got CCG on there, or for the ICB, I have to get straight out, and the self-funding rate. But I think, as I said, there are some other caveats as we described, what's coming from other local authorities as well. Then you can change the length of stay, and then it's done by bed count. So what we're trying to do is to look at what have we got now, but also what have we got within planning, what's coming through the system, or over the next, I think we've got up until 2033. So we can really work with planning to say, well, that one's come through and it's been accepted, because we don't want more here. We want more here. How do we work much more in a constructive way? Absolutely. So at the moment, just on some provisional, I should say, because Debbie knows I can't do this. Yeah, thank you. So you've got north there. So the blue line is residential placements. So there, and then you've got the line below sorry, the block line is residential capacity, I apologise. And then it's not green, it's orange, isn't it? The nursing is, so that is the current capacity in the north. And then the dotted lines below are the actual used capacity across and the predicted used capacity. So what we want to be able to see is a clear gap, which is what we're seeing there. And then you've got Central, which has got a far bigger gap, as you can, and I know as Councillor Wells, you just pointed out, there were some new care homes, particularly in the Central area. So you can see a big gap in terms of what it is that we think and believe is being used and currently and is predicted to be used against what the capacity looks like. And then you've got the same for South. So no, it's fine. So what we're seeing is, for me, that's pointing out very quickly, and don't forget there will be lots of other things, caveats that we need to consider as part of this. This isn't, but just visually, just from a few things there, my focus straight away as a commissioner would be going, I think I need to look at the north straight away.
That big new home opening in Whitchurch.
So
Massive one.
yeah, so I think there's something about making sure that we, and so at least it gives us commissioners as a starting point, right, let's look into that and what have we got. Now, I just will caveat that there are other things that we need to consider as part of this. One of the things will be affordability of those homes. So whilst there might be a massive capacity within Central, some of those homes will be very expensive to place and are absolutely focused on the self-funding market. So, there's other things that we just need to take into account and consider when we are looking at that. And that's one thing that we want to include in the model, is to look at what is the average cost and prices in the north, central and south. And do we have an issue around affordability for people and, social care to access some of those homes and services, and what do we need to do? But it's a really good starting position for us to do. So what we want to do now is develop that and use that a bit more. So we're going to use that as part of the market position statement, and it's asking more questions, and it will. And it's never going to be a final product, but it's a really good starter for 10. We want to do the same for domiciliary care. So look at, north, central and south. You've seen those maps. We've got ageing populations. What does that look like as we move forward? What we need to get far better at is predicting, with as best we can, what we are going to see, and aligning our businesses and supporting the market to align to those. That is the key thing here. Okay.
Sorry.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think that's a really good piece of work, because it's sort of very visual and it gives you something to hone in on. But are you doing it by bed type or just care home bed?
So it's bed type. So it's split between residential and nursing at the moment. And so it's really, again, it's one of those, it's a good question, because what the team quite rightly pointed out and said, well, what about complexity of care? Because we know some homes, for example, for those with complex care that will be catered to support more than others. What I want the market to be able to do, and what I want to work with them on, is for them all to be able to support people with complex need. Because people with dementia, we know the trends are going to increase. We're seeing our aging we've got aging population. Unfortunately, that comes with increased dementia. So how do we work with the market, and not just the care market, with other support services to support people with dementia? Again, it goes back to that inclusivity thing, and around making sure that we're trying to get people to a place where we know people can be supported, and we've not got pockets of areas where people can access good services and pockets where people can't. That's what we want to try and avoid.
And going back to your discussion around planning, your work with planning department, and the number of imports, for want of a better word, inward migration of older people, whatever we want to call it. Are you including in that the sort of sheltered housing accommodation, the Marsathian stone type, which does attract people who eventually age?
Having those exact conversations going to the absolutely. And what's really, really important, go back to the workforce link again, the other conversations we're having with planning is around affordable housing and accommodation, because where we want to bring people to are working age individuals who can support the care sector, the health and care sector, which is really, really important for us.
Can I just ask then, when you're looking at your 10-year plan, Does that tie in with the ICS's virtual wards at home in the community?
Yeah.
So you'd be working together on that,
Yes.
I assume.
Yeah, it is, and we're working on something really similar in terms of virtual care. You know, it's in its infancy, but and we can talk a bit more about that with the technology session that we're trying to organise for yourselves. But I can see it working really complementing each other really well. So the virtual ward are supported, and it's looking at how our in-house provider services could support those who may need a bit of personal care. Some of them won't, a high proportion may not need it, but it's making sure that we link that across. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Can I ask you, are we still getting people moving up here out of the cities? Because one time, and that when that was happening, they're going to be like me, getting older, and you know that made it that we, you know, they're leaving the big places where all the money is and coming to us.
Clear my interest.
Why wouldn't you want to come and live in our town?
So that's a bit of work Laura's doing to establish that.
And I think that's where it's really, really important to work with other directorates who are doing a lot of this work around the planning. And you know, again, I think I can't stress how important it is what we're planning on this, because you know what decisions are there will absolutely inform and support or not support, as the case may be, what we're doing here. So that's why we're really building some good relationships and some good discussion around that. But yeah, it is. Sorry, so the question. Sorry.
I mean, the inward migration, whatever we call it, it ultimately can potentially put a cost pressure or be a self-funding demand on the care sector. But antidote to that, people come with a different skill set and contribute a lot to communities of volunteers, and it's a fine balance, isn't it? You can't just say don't want to. Actually, people come and contribute a huge amount to the local economy and the local community.
I think, if I can, the point I was making really was the pressure on the carers market. That's the thing. If you suddenly got all these other people, they're going to need carers. So I was my question really was about the carers market.
Which leads us nicely, Claire, onto why we need to do things differently. And that is the challenge, isn't it? Because we know we've got an ageing population, but we also know there are different ways of supporting people with eligible needs. As I said, I haven't gone into a huge amount because we are going to organise a session where you can have you can kind of touch and feel some of the technology, and you can talk to Charlotte, who's kind of leading this area of work. But where you see there, I mean, it's about, reducing dependencies on paid support, not only to look at, it will reduce budget pressures, but the really important bit there is a reallocation of care services to others. So if we have got a scarce resource, how do we ensure that it's targeted to those who most need it, and for others who may be able to be supported with a bit of technology or digital support, they can, perhaps use that. So we're looking at, sorry, I won't go through that, but you can see what we're trying to do there in terms of increasing independence. We've got some really good case studies, again, which I'm hoping Charlotte's going to bring, and with individuals talking about their experience of using technology, which I think is really important. So we'll pick all that up at the next one of the future sessions on that. And there's just some of the few technologies that we use. People really like this Genie Connect. Don't ask me to go into the details of it, but they think it's a lovely, cute thing. They're quite responsive to the little robot. But as I said, Charlotte will take you through, so you'll get to see a bit of how this works, because it's hard to understand it until you kind of get a sense of what it can do or what it can't do.
It's what you and I went to see, isn't it? Some years ago at
10 years ago,
Yeah.
I think.
and just to give you an example, there was an elderly couple, wife was dementia, and he couldn't leave her, and so they put an alarm on all the doors so he could go in the garden and do his sort of time there, and if she moved down to the room she was in, his alarm would go, so he knew she was safe. That was just one example, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Another one was what's the other one? The bed, a pressure thing at the side of the bed, so he could sleep. But no, she got up. And, you know, it was just little things like that. And another one was a young man, and his TV would come on at a certain time, and they'd talk to him, and he loved it. And he'd tell him he'd had his pills and show him his dinner and everything. Just for that 5 minutes, somebody was there, but without having to physically get in a car and go.
Yeah.
And you know, since then I've been, wow.
It's great, and I think there's, you know, people are very much more receptive, particularly actually probably because of COVID as well. It's changed people's perceptions of technology in a it's probably pushed us 10 years forward actually in that respect. Yeah.
There's a problem, of course, with dementia patients, because I know my father-in-law had dementia, and to make sure he was safe, we gave him a tracker. Which was attached to something he carried around with him. We were away for the day and we kept looking and said, oh good, he hasn't gone out, you know, because he could drive at the time. What we found when we got back was he detached it and he constantly kept losing the car. But what I'm saying is, you know, technology doesn't always work, and if you can't think and you live on your own, it's a problem.
Absolutely, and it's not one size fits all, is it? And it's about enhancing and supporting people. So if we can, you know, support people to remain at home for longer, we can support those who are caring for them as well, because again, that's a massive pressure. It's definitely, it's not replacement. I hate that word, and I don't, you know, I do not use that. I use the word enhancing, you know, their lives and their outcomes.
So can I just, because we've deviated a bit, can I just ask you this question of the report? So in the report, you do talk about technology and you talk about 2 carers in the car.
Yeah.
And then we talk about the falls response team, which used to be funded by Health and is no longer funded by Health. So that's so it should. I mean, so where is Health in all this? Because quite clearly we haven't really touched on that yet. But I think from the others, you know, from the transformation scrutiny's point of view, they're quite keen to look at that relationship, the ICS, because we're looking at it in, you know, maybe a way of partnership working. Because it seems to me they want a partnership as long as we pay for it, and so you know, where is that, and will it be in a plan or?
So just in terms of the falls service that we described there, it's no longer funded. NHSE only gave 3 months funding for the falls response service. So what they're doing now, and they are putting an individual to work part-time on looking at the falls service and what that could look like. And it all the way through the pathways in terms of early prevention, as well as potentially a full response service. So that is ongoing work at the moment, which we're working and supporting health colleagues with. We've got some funding that both local authorities, Health and Region and Shropshire Council did collaboratively as an ICS to get some digital funds. So we've got a project board doing a specific piece of work that it was mandated, well, it's not kind of mandated, but so there are specific outcomes in relation to that, which includes working with the market to ensure that to get them to do digital care records, essentially, to move them forward. So there's a big piece of work there that we're doing. There's also been some Department of Health and Social Care funding bids, and we put a bid in, or we put a couple of bids in. We are only one of 15 out of I think it was 100 applicants that have gone through to the second round. So there is funding and support that we're getting from the ICS in terms of the digital focus. And whatever comes out of the report, we'll have to look at what that funding might look like for the full service in particular. But I'm not paying you, Claire, but it leads me nicely into demand management, because one of what I would say is one of the key things that I'm saying around the market position statement is the first bit is all about how are we managing and reducing demand, and I think that's a key challenge to our health colleagues, and and something I'm trying to work with them on. So really, the focus on the early intervention and prevention. What are we doing around preventing falls and supporting falls? What are we doing around using digital solutions? And again, I think Councillor Hayden, when we talk, you're describing earlier on around, the self-funded market, and the challenges that we've got around the information and advice and support, that is really key. We need to have information and advice that is accessible and understood, so people make informed decisions. Because if you don't know these things, if you don't know about quality within care homes and where to look for information, if you don't know what other options and choice that you've got, what groups are available, what carer support groups are available within that market, whatever it may be, then how can you make informed decisions about what you do next? Because it isn't about, it's either domiciliary care or it's a care home. That's not what life's about, and that's not what we're trying to do. So there's work that the demand management and working with our colleagues within public health to pull together a prevention strategy is a really key piece of work for us. And also looking at what does that, and we keep calling it the front door, we need to call it something else, but what does that front door model look like in terms of that access to start with? You don't need to come straight to speak to a social worker necessarily. You may be able to, have your issues or challenges resolved by somebody who just knows where to go and where to point you to. So we're reviewing and redeveloping that. As I said, we've talked about having a good. What we're trying to do is to have a good quality and sustainable market, isn't it? Based upon what we know, the needs are, and that we've got that good quality across. So we're reviewing the rating models at the moment. We're working across the market again, as I said, to be really inclusive. And that's not just care homes and that's the shops. That's that's whereas across the directorate we need to be doing a lot more together about how we challenge some of our commercial services to ensure we've got that inclusivity. We really are developing the quality dashboards. The care home when we started with. I had my Joint Commission Delivery Group this week who got very excited, and they put a list in now about which ones they want to focus on, because it's the way forward around that information and coming into one central point as risk rating that and working with our market to improve and having that good relationship with them. And we're also, again, as part of that, in looking at what that quality assurance looks like across all ages, not just adults, across all ages, and what good quality and contract management looks like. So there's a lot of work that we need to do around that. And it's really, really important. I just put there to build a good relationship with the market. They do a fantastic job. They're amazing. The workers go out there, rain, snow, floods, and what we hear back, and it might be the only person they may have seen that day. So it's really important that we really support the market and develop that. I'm just conscious of time. Do you want me just to go very quickly? Sorry, Claire.
So yes, sorry, if I may. I don't want to muddy the water, but we haven't talked a lot really about discharge, and it isn't really part of the demand management, but it is a really important thing, and hopefully you are doing some work with ICS on that as a separate thing. Because it's almost another piece of work as big as the demand management.
Completely, and it is an essential part of demand management. You're absolutely right. And so we've got, as part of one of the big transformation projects that we've got within the local authority, working with colleagues, is the Reablement project, which is to do just that. It's to look at those individuals coming through. And making sure that people are on what we describe as the right kind of pathway. Can they go home without support? Can they go home with a bit of support? And can they go home? Do they need to go into a short-term bed, into real good intensive periods of bereavement? How do we ensure that our in-house staff provision service is we've got enough recruitment, retention to support the numbers that we've got coming through? So they're doing all of that work as we speak, and working. It's a lot of people involved with the bereavement project. It's the right thing to do. I would say, one of the things that I probably haven't put on there, but even though they're in-house provider service, they are part of our market, aren't they? Wider market. Is our start in-house provider services has had a massive improvement in recruitment retention. Really, really good. And the performance figures have doubled since last year, this time last year. I mean, you know, and continuing to increase. So they're really, certainly the manager is doing a huge amount of work around the processes and what we can do to streamline some of that to improve that connectivity and make, you know, so more people have got access to a period of bereavement, because that's all they need sometimes. You know, people have gone into hospital with no previous care package before. You know, if we can support them to get back on their feet and give them that bit of time and intense therapy input, you know, it will make all that difference. And that's, you know, predominantly what people want to have, isn't it? So I'm just conscious of time, so I'm just going to go very quickly through. That's just an indication of what we're trying to do around improving our performance data and intelligence gathering. It's really important to say it's not just about numbers, it's about what people are telling us. And again, that's where we need to do some improvement and to really improve our feedback mechanisms. So whilst we look at compliments and complaints, etc., it's making sure, I think, on an annual basis, as part of that quality assurance framework, are we asking our customers the right questions? So are we doing an annual self-assessment, you know, and making sure that they are receiving good quality care? And if things could have been done differently, what could that look like? So that is another area of focus for us. Just in terms of what's next, again, you know, I don't need to describe that again. I've talked about the prevention, I've talked about the market position statement, talked about the intergenerational model of support and that inclusive kind of services. We're obviously looking at the redesign of care at home, which we described, which will include domiciliary care. We're looking at supported living, because we know we've got high costs, as we talked about earlier. The bereavement we've just talked about, that we're doing a piece of work on. The joint commissioning, so we've just we've gone out to tender on a joint community equipment provision, which is across Telford and Wrekin, Shropshire and Health colleagues. That's a really good piece of work that we've managed to push forward. That will come to Cabinet later on in the year to once we can go toward contract. But, you know, a way that we can manage the market is to do it by together, because it's going to bring, you know, a lot more interest in, as you can imagine. And then we've talked about the quality assurance development. And then the last slide really is just like, you know, potential areas of focus that I can see, but, you know, for future scrutiny task and finish groups. But you would have picked up on some of the points that you may want to describe, because underneath each of those, there will be multiple layers. You know, prevention demand management's massive. It will be the bereavement project. It will be the technology. It will be, you know, the front door and the prevention strategy, making sure that's right, the falls. So, you know, there's multiple layers underneath those headings, really. And I will stop. So.
If you want to go first, Ruth.
I don't mind. I just have a few questions from the report, actually, Chair, if I may. Well, first of all, you talk about in the report about a carbon imprint and providers being expected to develop, reduce their carbon imprint. How are you monitoring that, and how are providers having to demonstrate that?
So we haven't done that yet, Councillor. So that what we're going to be doing is part of the new contracts. So we're obviously looking at the new contracts that are going out now. What we want to do is embed, you know, and as part of the quality assurance and the contract management feedback, how are you evidencing that you've reduced a journey, or you may have used a bike if you were in this central? I mean, we've got to be pragmatic about this, haven't we? Because we are a rural county, so we do need car use. But there are other things that they can be doing, and you know, it could be things like how are they, you know, have they got solar panels, or all sorts of those types of things, really. So part of the what we want to do as part of the self-assessment, this is what we've done. It's what I've done historically in other areas, is you've got an annual self-assessment where you're asking the usual, what's your recruitment retention like, you know, what's your compliments, complaints, but what also have you done to reduce the carbon footprint? Because it's quite naughty. So it's quite interesting to see, you know, what you know, providers are doing, because they want to reduce costs, which inevitably, reduces carbon footprint. So that's something that's going to be, a piece of work that we need to embed as part of our business as usual, which is quite a different, for what we've done historically.
Two more. The current blue badge delays, which were reported in council last week, is there any correlation between people waiting for those blue badges and coming forward needing support? Because they are critical for independence, and some of the waits are significant, 18 weeks or so.
I wouldn't know that, Council. We can see if we can cross-reference anybody in the waiting list associated with a blue badge, but I'm not aware of any direct correlation. We'd have to have a look into that.
And then my final question is around adults with learning disabilities. You said 87% live independently or with family. Where are the other 13%? Are they long-stay hospital, NHS funded? But the ones with family, do you have an age profile and what's the forward planning for those people perhaps living with older family carers?
Yeah, we've got some of that data. So what we do know, and again, it won't be a surprise to us, is that we've got an ageing carer, cohort. So some we won't be aware of because actually they're managing and being supported without the need for any kind of social care, intervention. So it's making sure that we are linking in with GPs and other services to ensure that we know where they are. But we won't know where they all are, in honesty, Councillor. I think we are aware of some that may have come from, or to children's services. But that is a challenge, I think, to be honest.
The question of forward looking for the market.
We know a low proportion. A low proportion do live within a residential home setting, because as you can see, those numbers are very, very low, and I think we are probably benchmark top nationally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then we've got, in a region of about 240 people within supported living. So a high proportion, if not many of those, will be those with a learning disability and or autism. So that's what we want to be growing, is that area, but making sure that it's an affordable model, which is really, really key.
Thank you. Somebody else wants. Was it you, Claire, wanted a question?
Well, it wasn't really a question. I was thinking about more about a recommendation really from the committee, because I'm sure we all feel that we all want to contribute to the prevention strategy, and anything that can help feed into the CQC report has got to be good. So I was thinking about a recommendation about the committee feeding into the prevention strategy, and also setting up a task and finish group. I think what would be really interesting with the task and finish group is that there's quite a lot in there. There's the discharge and reablement, there's the prevention, loads of different things. And actually, it would be quite good, I think, if the task and finish group, if we spoke to health and performance as well, and kind of did a joint one, because it feeds choices as well. It feeds into all of them really, and it's such an important thing for us all. But I think it'd be quite good if we had a task and finish group that that represented perhaps all the various committees. But I'd take some feedback off officers or portfolio holders, or I don't know what you think, Cecilia.
I would counsel against trying to have too wide a scope, because then you're not. First of all, you're going to have a task and finish group that has to sit for a very long time to get all the information together. I think you're probably better concentrating on one area, which could feed in the work that Laura's doing, rather than trying to bring too many other parties in. I mean, we are very conscious of the fact that we are still building our relationships with the ICS. We're not there yet entirely, it has to be said. And whilst input from the ICS is always helpful, I don't think it's a very good idea to just take a broad sweep and try and nail down an awful lot of things. Because if you do that, as I said, A, it's going to take a very long time, and B, you're probably not going to get the same granular level of information as if you were tackling parts of the problem rather than the whole problem.
Okay, so if we as this committee concentrate on the prevention strategy, I don't know.
So if I may, I think that's an excellent idea. If we can look at prevention and demand management, but not just about the local authority offer, because prevention and demand management is about the system, isn't it? So that would be an opportunity, I would suggest, as a task and finish group to invite other people in, including health, because everyone needs to get behind prevention and demand management, not just about Shropshire Council.
Yes, and also it will then avoid. It will then mean that you've got a really sharp focus, and it's something which is so high up our agenda at the moment that it is absolutely off the moment. So I think we'd all be delighted if you wanted to do something along those lines.
Okay, I don't know if I
Can I just, you talked about, I can't remember the young lady's name, talking to us about the technology part of it.
Yeah.
Would she be doing it as a briefing?
She wants to, I think that was what we discussed.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think that's what we discussed, I think, wasn't it, that we do a briefing session for you so you can understand, and then that will help inform, those discussions around, the prevention strategy, because once you can see it, you're probably going to have more questions as well then, and then that really should be feeding into that kind of prevention strategy. So it's quite nicely, I think, because it gives you that understanding. And obviously prevention isn't just about technology, it's far wider than that, but the prevention strategy is really important, and I completely agree with Tanya. It's not just a local authority agenda, this is everybody's agenda, and and it's, if we use that phrase, don't we, about turning that tank around, or everybody needs to get upstream it, because I keep saying it's not about the number of discharges from hospital, it's not about that, it's actually, if I see less, great, what are we doing about, why are they going in, what are we doing about that, what's happening? So this is a system issue, and we've got an aging population with very vulnerable needs, so and children, it's not just the adults, so we need to do something very differently, don't we?
And it's also very much following the trend, the national trend. We are in any case an aging population, it's not peculiar to Shropshire. It's a national problem, and this is something which actually I suspect if we can do a really good piece of work on this, I think this is something which could be an exemplar for other authorities and health authorities as well.
Yeah, and I think we've shown a commitment to actually, as a committee, to want to care and be involved in strategy. So I'm quite happy to propose that. Is everyone?
Seconded.
Right,
I'm happy to second it.
And what? Anybody else? Have you got an opinion?
Focusing firstly on the prevention strategy with assistive technology as a briefing within that.
Yeah.
Just look at this work programme, because they're the two
I
separate
think we
things.
need some briefings, because we've never tackled this part of it, have we, before, from our scrutiny. We've always focused more on the children's side. So there's a lot of this, we know a bit about, but something I think we're going to have to go into a lot deeper.
So I think what you're going to have to think about, or what Laura will be able to tell us, we probably need at least 2 briefings, but at the same time we can set up the task and finish group, because the reality is we're not going to be doing it now till probably over the summer. So hopefully before the end of the summer we'll have had a couple of briefings, and then we can start doing the work. And I think it'll stand us in very good stead with the CQC that we're actually holding hands on this one, because it is something that we all need to hold hands on.
I've got no difficulty with suggestion, but I do Well, you mentioned children's services, Laura. We haven't really talked a lot about prevention strategies, and I do think the remedies are going to be quite different, and it's quite complex to bring the two together into one work. So my question is it too big a scope to include both adults and children to be in one working group?
I was just proposing adults.
Well, that was mentioned children. So what are you doing about children's? Because I think financially the hit on the council is coming very much from children's services, and whereas we saw the very low expenditures on children's services, so equally I propose that we have two, because I think the issue is the prevention of demand for coming into children's services are actually financially going to be quite huge for the council, but actually in terms of quality, well, they're both important services, so my point trying to argue the merits or demerits of either of them. I'm just worried that if we try and do it in one, children's won't get the attention it needs.
But in fairness,
We
we've
weren't trying to do that though, were we?
no,
Well, you mentioned children's here, so I'm a bit
No,
confused.
because I think we've done quite a lot of work on children's. In fact, that's what we've focused on for the last 2 years.
Prevention strategy for children.
Yes.
If I may,
Yeah.
the prevention strategy that we're currently working with all age.
Yes, of course it was.
the
Yeah.
Prevention strategy.
So you're just doing half of it, you're just doing the adults and you're not doing the children's.
No, we're doing all
Yeah.
of it.
You're doing all of it. Okay, so children's part of the task.
I think
It just makes
it
confused.
needs to be, because,
I do,
particularly with digital stuff, actually children are really receptive, so we've done some really good, and we'll talk that through some case studies with, some children in, in special schools who have been very receptive to that. In that demand management and that front door, we need to be able to ensure they're accessible to everybody, don't they? Because families are multiple, they've got granddad children, it's that intergenerational model as I described as well. Really important that we manage that. So, I mean, that the strategy is all ages. I think there will be some things that are specific. Falls will be a good one. Will be specific to, particularly adults. But there are other things that they'll hit right across all ages anyway.
Yeah.
So it will be all ages, not
But
adults.
I think that the technology will be all ages, but the falls I think will be for older people. So I think that there will be a slightly stronger focus on the older people than the youngsters in the task and finish. Only because that we haven't had the briefings or the information on the adult stuff yet.
I'm sure there'll be some issues which are specific to children, there's some issues that are specific to adults, I get that. But the whole issue sits under one prevention strategy and there shouldn't be a focus on either to the detriment of either.
Well, we can make a start.
Yeah, we just been clear about the remit, isn't it?
We
Thank you
need
before we
to,
start.
have a session just on children's. That's what we can do. That's what.
Yeah.
This is the point of changing scrutiny, is to get more deep dive. Is the word? Am I going the right way?
I don't know different. I'm just trying to see what the remit, whether it includes children's or not, or whether we're going to have something separate for children. Seems that we're not. It's going to include children. It's all going to be all age. So to resolve it.
Well, you could call it an intergenerational task and finish. That neatly wrapped up.
Holistic or something like that.
You're all happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Anybody got any more questions for Laura? That was excellent. Thank you. We've learned. I think I've learned an awful lot just from you coming here and doing that. Really have. You set rabbits off though, haven't you? Making us think about things. That's what it's about. So,
Laura, you'll make the slides available.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
adoption of work product. We'll go on to item 7, which is the adoption of. Sorry.
Who's on this task and finish group? Because you've just resolved to set
It goes out, doesn't it?
It goes out as an invite.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just on what the process.
Yeah, so I think somebody has to do the terms of reference for it, and then the invitations go out.
Okay, well, what's happening? It's populated. Okay.
Well, it actually again takes us on perfectly to the next item,
Yeah.
because what we're going to look at here, and we're looking today to get agreement that this is the work programme that you'd like to go forward. So hopefully you've had sight of this because it was in part of the report pack ahead of time anyway, but the bit that wasn't included initially on this document but you have seen elsewhere, so you have seen the information, and the end slide here is the briefings as well, and I think that's really important to the conversation that has just been having. So these have been drawn up through the work programming process admittedly there was some issues with the sound quality for the second session, which apologies for. But anything, this is your document as a committee. If anything, does need to be amended, that can absolutely happen. And these are the draft topics that have been set out through the process of, hopefully inclusive process of being able to take into account the different topics and opportunities that were identified by yourself as members.
Thank you very much. So I just want to say a few things about this. I think the important thing is that the work programme stays as a live document. I don't think it should be cast in stone. I think the other really important point is that the way Scrutiny operates has changed. It's going to become more outcome focused. And I think we're only just getting to grips with that. So actually what I would expect is that there would be another meeting, perhaps September, October time, where we can actually have a look at what we've done, how we sort of, changing people's idea and perception of Scrutiny, how we're actually turning the town around. Because when you change everything, it does take a little bit for everyone to kind of
Adapt.
Get into gear. So I would say that it's a live document.
Absolutely.
And we should perhaps look at it later in the year and have the opportunity to actually
yes, I would absolutely
see how it's going.
At every committee that option can be there. And as you say, if there's an appetite for it, a session in between as well. So that's absolutely available. And I think just given the conversation today, in terms of commissioning that first piece of work from this work programme, I think that's already been proposed and agreed, which is fantastic. And I just wanted to just run over the briefings then in terms of what has initially been proposed, but of course can be adapted. But I actually think it works very well with the discussions. So the initial briefing that's been prioritised is one around what is meant by adult social care. So there has been a very comprehensive input today in terms of the market management, but acknowledging that obviously the service is wider than that. So that's what's been prioritised at the moment in terms of what felt like the right briefing point, if that feels like that's appropriate. Yeah, that's it. And then the next one is exactly that, the digital session that Laura was discussing. And now that we've had, if this is formally adopted, we can then begin to sort out dates for that. And absolutely, echoing that in terms of it being a hands-on, in-person experience, because absolutely having hybrid meetings can be very effective. But for this, sort of through discussions, felt it'd be better to be an in-person one. So they're the two that at the moment have been prioritised. The others are there, and I'll share this document around afterwards, which has the other ones on it in terms of what next steps might be, so we can continue those discussions. But they should be able to happen relatively speedily now, depending on officer availability and room bookings.
And is there did you say technology? Because I think that's going to be, you need a session on technology.
Yes, absolutely. And that is, really identified as being very key, because it feeds into, at least 3 really of the identified work topics. So that's why it's identified as one to do early on, to give that context.
Yeah. On your member briefings, you've got how ready the ICS for the CQC inspection. Now, are we expecting that in October, or has it been? Is that the earliest they could do it?
So the earliest they could come into the local authority is from October. And they've currently got 5 local authorities they're doing a pilot on. The closest one to Shropshire is Birmingham. So we're closely monitoring how Birmingham are getting on. But the earliest they could come in is October to the local authority. There is still not the guidance out yet around how they're going to inspect the ICS. So we're expecting the ICS not until it'll be late next year.
Okay, so that isn't quite as such a high priority, unless when they inspect the local authority, they look at how we work with partners.
Well, that is a part of it, yes.
But slightly concerned about that, given our conversations around the Ofsted and Send. input and the need for health to
Mm.
have their game on that.
Yeah.
That's coming back to the meeting in November, isn't it?
November.
That's going back to the meeting in November. The health.
Yes, so
Yeah,
this,
but
the
wasn't it-
question is, how ready are the ICS for CQC inspection? So it's where we want to see that in the sort of
Yes,
priorities.
I would suggest next year, because we're still waiting upon the guidance to come out.
But I think the point Ruth was making, the point I thought Ruth was making was that the reason partly we had problems with the send and the offset thing was because we were having problems getting the services from the ICS. So I don't know, and so if we're going to have the CQC report, then we need to have sorted our relationship out with the ICS because they'll be looking at that. That's what I thought, but
Well, that's one element of that.
yeah, it's one
Yeah,
element of
if
what
I
she
could
said, yeah.
I was in a draft improvement plan following our adult social care readiness review. That should come as a task and finish group this side of Christmas, because you know we may get that call in October, and I think that's absolutely right for this committee to hold us account in terms of our improvement plan, which will include our effective relationships and partnership with the ICS.
And we are talking about outcomes from scrutiny now, and I think that's absolutely critical, and it's one we can and should measure because it's really important for our people.
Interested in November, won't it? Let's see what they come back with. Sorry, Joyce, you weren't there when we took them to task.
And just one final point, very following on from Claire's comment around, the way scrutiny is working and reflecting some of what you were saying around, cross committee, that because topics, much of the world is a system world now, and there is that appreciation and understanding, therefore, that topics may, sometimes cross boundaries in terms of the committees, so that we're very conscious of that in terms of supporting, in terms of recommendations being able to make to other committees and that process. So it is something that we're very much bearing in mind from supporting you.
Cecilia, anything you wish to add?
No, I don't think so. I think this is all beginning to go forward in a different way, isn't it? I think that's very healthy.
You're happy with it all? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Especially the staff for their input today. I've learned a lot, I'm sure. Quite a few of them. Next meeting is on the 15th of November. Make sure you're there for the briefings. Make sure you put your name forward for the assessment finish group. Thank you. Meeting closed.